Hi, welcome to the Badass Breastfeeding Podcast. This is Dianne, your lactation consultant.
And this is Abby, the Badass Breastfeeder. And today's episode is brought to you by Sarah's Chill, a company that never stops making the lives of breastfeeding parents easier. And today's episode is also brought to you by Fairhaven Health. Milky's Nipple Nurture Balm is your organic and lanolin-free answer to sore or cracked nipples. We will hear more from our sponsors later, but you can head to badassbreastfeedingpodcast.com anytime and check out our sponsor page. See if you can give them any of your business because they make this podcast possible. And while you're there, scroll down and enter your email address and we will send episodes straight to your inbox every week. And we are on Patreon and we're having so much fun that we wish you would join us. We have our extra ad-free episodes. We have our mini podcasts, our Revolution Parenting podcast in there, and our weekly wellness checks and all kinds of fun. So check the top link in the show notes, wherever you're listening from, under this episode. Follow the link there and check out the different tier benefits. We are also still hosting our ongoing giveaway for the reviews around the internet. If you leave a review anywhere that you're able to leave a review, send us a screenshot and an address to badassbreastfeedingpodcast@gmail.com, and we will send you a goodie bag of cards and stickers and all kinds of fun stuff.
And along with that, it's okay if you live in a different country. Because people have emailed us that too. I don't know if you can send it to me because I live in Canada or I live in, I don't know, Paris, wherever. It doesn't matter. I can send them. It's totally fine. So if you live somewhere else and you also would like to get in on it and get a couple stickers and a couple cards, then go ahead and shoot us a email.
I actually always send more to the people international because I figure I'm already paying international postage. So I might as well throw some extras in there and then pass it around your,
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
I think that's all.
And so now it's time for my review.
Yes.
Oh, awesome. I'm 4.5 months. I'm 4.5 months into breastfeeding and just recently found this podcast. I love it. There's an episode on just about every topic I need. My favorite thing about this podcast is how encouraging the hosts are. I feel more confident in my momming abilities after each episode. Thank you so much. Because you know what? I don't always feel very confident in my momming ability. And I am very glad that I'm able to help you with your momming ability because I need help with my own momming ability. I know.
Can you help us?
I know. Can you please help us with our older children?
And you do.
Yes.
I mean, people do all the time. I mean,
oh yeah,
it's really cool how
that's what community is all about.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, that's what community is all about, and that's why we love our community that we have here because we want to be supportive of what you all are doing, regardless of what it is.
Yes. And I know some people who don't want to be supportive of you and your breastfeeding journey. And that is the formula company.
So this is not going to be an episode to bash formula. It's an episode about marketing.
Okay. I'm going to say this one time. I'm going to say this one time and one time only. I do not care if you formula fed. I did too. So did Dianne.
I did too.
We don't give a shit. What we are talking about is the marketing ploys by formula companies that go so much deeper than you even know. And I've been looking into this for a really long time, and it goes even farther than I know because every time I read something, I'm like, oh my God, I've never knew that.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just so much bigger than all of us. And it has nothing to do with whether you choose to formula feed or want to do that. I don't give a shit. This is about people being manipulated at an extremely vulnerable time in their lives and the health effects that it has through society and history.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm not going to keep saying that because that's going to waste our time. But there are some really important things that we need to talk about, and we're going to talk about them. And they're true, whether you want them to be or not, and whether you're formula fed or not.
Right.
Great. So yeah. So this episode actually came out of someone emailed us, a listener emailed and said like, oh, did you see that the Lancet did this series on breastfeeding and the formula marketing industry and all of this, and the effects. And then they had like recommendations, and I was like, that's really cool, and read most of it. I mean, it's really long. And then I was like, oh, it's got like this summit, like you can look up the summit where they're talking about this, and it's really long and like extra boring because it's just people like talking, like all these really smart people talking to each other. So I didn't watch that because it was too boring. But I did go through the article and picked out stuff that I think was really important. And then it kind of turned into this other book, The Politics of Breastfeeding, which I've talked about. I think we've mentioned on the podcast before. And so I've just been kind of like, I haven't really read it cover to cover. I've just been kind of reading it topic by topic. But the whole book is basically like the politics of breastfeeding. And there's just things that are just, I can't, like my brain, it's just so insane. And the one thing, I'm just going to get it right out of the way. And so also this is going to jump around because there's so much stuff. I mean, the origins of this go into the origins of the economic system in the United States. It all goes like, there's stuff that's just like really way over my head as far as like my education and my knowledge of that kind of stuff, meaning like economics and shit. I don't know. I'm not real good at that. But this is all born out of that, out of this capitalist system and all of that. But so it's going to be jumping around a lot. And my point is to just kind of share things that I don't think people know, that I didn't know, that I think should be known. And yeah.
Really interesting.
It's so interesting.
It is really interesting. So even if this is like, maybe not quite your thing or whatever, like this stuff is so, or you don't think it's quite your thing. It is so interesting. The backstory about this stuff. And I mean, it's hard for me. Like sometimes it's hard for me to even wrap my brain around how dedicated people are to their cause.
Yeah. And how devastating it is and how
devastating it is which I'm sure, I mean, I don't know. I'd like to think that people don't go into it going, let's fuck everybody up, but they're out there for money. Like that's the bottom line.
They're not thinking about other people. I mean, and one thing that stands out to me a lot through all of this discussion is how much our like public policy and our, medical recommendations and, government funded agencies recommendations really come from a place of profit, not from a place of science. Because you turn on this, you read the series, the Lancet series, these are doctors, these are researchers, these are scientists that are like, that are saying that we need to support breastfeeding. We need to increase breastfeeding rates. Breastfeeding will save lives. People are dying. And, then you come over, you go outside or you go to the doctor and they're just like, oh, no, it's no big deal. And it's like, where's the disconnect? Like there's such a disconnect, and it's capitalism. That's the disconnect, is we make decisions based on money. We don't make decisions based on science as far as like the public policy and shit goes.
Right.
Especially with this. I mean, this industry is so huge. But
it is bigger than people realize. Yeah. The formula industry is really, and when you go to get because I know that when I used formula, I wasn't thinking about like how it was marketed. So I'm sure nobody's thinking about that.
Exactly.
You want to feed your baby, right? You have to feed your baby. So you go and you get formula if you need it or whatever, because you need to feed your baby, but you don't think about how it's marketed. You don't think about any of that.
Right. You don't think about that. And you think it doesn't affect you. That's the thing is people, well, I'm not affected by marketing. Nobody marketed formula to me. None of that is true. I mean, there are people that get like their PhDs in psychology of marketing. Like you know, it's a psychological game. I mean, this stuff. I mean, just keep talking about this stuff and not getting to the stuff. But these kinds of things, as you will see as we go through the episode, this stuff has completely changed our cultural views, our cultural norms. You know, it has that much of an effect. And we just don't realize what these companies are doing. And for example, much of the research that comes out about formula and breastfeeding is financed by formula companies. So that right there, if you know anything about research, that is a problem.
Mm-hmm.
And it's in their best interest that people find it difficult to breastfeed. For example, I'm going to read something from the Politics of Breastfeeding. There was a U.S.-based company, Abbott Ross, provided free design planning for hospitals. Quote, the purpose here is to impose, this is a quote from Abbott Ross in their statement of design and their suggestions on design planning for hospitals. The purpose here is to impose a design that literally builds bottle feeding into the facility by physically separating mother and infant to make bottle feeding more convenient than breastfeeding for the hospital staff. A single investment in such architectural services can create a new sales opportunities for the entire lifespan of the building.
It's crazy.
Did you know that hospitals were built to facilitate bottle feeding and to decrease chances of breastfeeding? Because I didn't fucking know that.
Oh, that's crazy. It's insane.
Yeah, and so and she also talks about in this book, like, you know, we have things like insulin. Insulin is needed by a certain part of the population.
Mm-hmm.
But if your doctor just came up to you randomly and was like, you should just use insulin, you'd be like, why? You wouldn't.
No.
And formula is the same thing. Formula was a great invention. So formula is very useful in certain situations. Formula is needed in some situations. There's no reason to have marketing for it. There's no reason for it to have anything on the packaging except for what it is, the ingredients, and what it's used for. Not a pretty picture of a baby, not all of this to try to get you, not all of these like false things about how great it is, you know, for your baby. The marketing of formula it's unethical to market it at all. It should be literally prescribed by a doctor when needed.
Yeah.
And get it in a little white box or white container and you feed it.
That marketing works.
The marketing works so well.
Yeah, I remember there's one formula that is labeled right on there saying the best for supplementing.
Yeah.
And I remember somebody telling me, well, I'm using that one that's the best for supplementing. That's the formula I'm using. Like, they're all the same. It's the exact same as the other one that's sitting next to it on the shelf. But it's marketed to be the best for supplementing. So as soon as you want to stop breastfeeding or as soon as you need a break, you can use that formula because that's the best one for it. It's just crazy.
It is. So I'm going to continue to go through this book and my notes. I have notes and then I have arrows to the really special notes. And we will fucking not get through any of this today. Well, some of it, but not all of it. So in the late 19th, a market for artificial milk and infant feeding products was created in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. It was conceived through the mutual attraction of manufacturers and doctors. This love affair developed into an enduring and stable marriage, which has lasted to this day. Doctors found that they could make money by inventing and promoting substitutes of breast milk. And of course, their clients were the wealthier women prepared to pay for them, because wealthier women were going to the doctors. Poor women were breastfeeding and not. You know?
Yeah.
Wealthier women were going to the doctors, and then the doctors saw this opportunity. Doctors saw a financial opportunity. I mean, hello. How's that for a conflict of interest?
Right.
Then they came up with the term infant formula. They just invented that out of nowhere. It made it sound so intriguing. This formula is specifically designed. My baby has his own specific formula that is just for her. And that word still lasts to this day, obviously. And despite the fact that it was just based on cow's milk, there was nothing special about it. This was just how they started to advertise it. And people started going to their doctors, getting their special formula. And then companies were like, well, wait, we could just have like one general formula and then we could sell it to all these people. And then doctors were like, hey, wait a minute, you're taking away all of our business. And then the formula companies were like, oh, oops, we don't want to step on doctors' toes because we need them. We need them to, promote our product. So then what happened? They started to seduce doctors. They started to send them money, send them free samples, send them gifts, send them steak dinners, send them all of these incentives. And that still happens to this day.
It happens with all pharmaceutical.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is like, it's no different than another pharmaceutical. I mean,
if
anybody watched, right, it's more for sure. If anybody watched Dope Sick,
I never saw that. Is that good?
Oh my God, so good. So good. But it is a great way. It is a great comparison. Yeah. Because it's how the whole opioid thing got started.
Yeah, right,
it's a true story.
Right. Yeah,
it's a true story about the family that started the opioid problem.
Right.
It's the same thing, how they were just manipulating these doctors and just making shit up and manipulating the doctors to get what they needed and get more people on their drug.
And then we came up with hospital birthing. Because people used to be born at home. I don't know if anybody knows this, because people being born at home now is like friggin' scandalous. But not that long ago, everyone was born at home. Yeah. That's where you were. And there weren't hospitals for birthing places. Then we medicalized childbirth, which was a fantastic move for formula. Because then they had just direct contact, with everybody having a baby. Mm-hmm. Midwives were outlawed. You think of a midwife now, people think of them as like witches. That's who was there. All of the things that we think now about are being totally crazy, we have been manipulated into thinking are crazy. The majority of doctors then and now were woefully ignorant of the practicalities of breastfeeding. And then then formula started to become really fashionable with with the wealthier people. So you had this kind of typical idea of on the wealthier kind of end of things. This man who made a lot of money, the woman who would stay home and spend that money, which was fantastic because that's how capitalism works. You have to have somebody making money and spending money. That's what happens. And so then it just became real vogue. It was real cool to formula feed. You weren't going to breastfeed. That meant you were poor.
Right.
But we formula feed. We can afford that. Our special formula for our baby.
It became a status symbol.
Yes, absolutely. And along with this, I wish I could find that other quote. It was this quote by this guy, this doctor. It's somewhere in this book, this 400-page book, of which I've underlined everything. When you're doing that, You're like, oh, I got to keep track of all the good stuff, and everything is underlined because it's like an insane
everything
topic.
is good.
I guess we should take a break. I'll get back to it. I can't quite exactly remember what he said, but he said he was a doctor and he came out with this statement that, women were incapable of making good decisions for their babies and that these decisions really should be in the hands of the doctors.
Yes, I saw that quote in that book.
Oh, you did? Okay. So yeah. So this was like a very prominent doctor and people were like, okay. And so, you only have to be told that 1,000 times before you start to really internalize this. Yeah. So we had this real frailty of women and this women were not capable really of taking care of their babies or making good decisions. And so that we're leaning into our doctors more who are profiting on us through formula.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Should we just take a break real quick?
Yeah.
All right. We'll be right back with one of my favorite topics. Today's episode is brought to you by Fairhaven Health. If you're struggling with sore nipples, you need pain relief fast. And when sore nipples turn to cracked nipples, forget about it. It's enough to want to call it quits. Damaged nipples can cause real problems with successfully breastfeeding your baby. Check with a lactation consultant that your baby's getting a good latch and get some Milky's Nipple Nurture Balm. Nipple Nurture Balm is formulated to soothe, protect, and heal sore or cracked nipples. This nipple balm is made with organic herbal ingredients and combined with natural moisturizers to help provide relief and to heal affected areas, and even prevent cracks from reappearing. Nurture Nipple Balm alleviates the discomfort so the joy can be restored to your special bonding time. It's safe for both parent and baby, and there is no need to wipe it off before breastfeeding. Head to fairhavenhealth.com, that's FAIRHAVEN health.com, and use promo code BADASS for 15% off of your purchase. Today's episode is also brought to you by Sarah's Chill, a company that never stops making the lives of breastfeeding parents easier. Clunky coolers, bulky bags, batteries, and cords are so yesterday. Created by a mom for moms, Sarah's Chill guarantees convenience with their double-walled stainless steel breast milk chillers. A handful of ice is all you need to keep your breast milk or formula safe for 20 hours. No more lugging around bags full of plastic and chemical freeze packs. Now you can pump and double pump all day into one sleek container. Sarah's Chill is there for you no matter where your journey takes you. Breast milk storage, formula storage, cow's milk storage, or for toddlers and more. Their products are not only beautiful, they're also travel-friendly and FSA, HSA reimbursable. This is truly breast milk storage reimagined. Head over to sarahschill.com, that's CERESCHILL.com, or check them out on Instagram at the same name. Use code BADASS for 15% off of your purchase. And all of our sponsors and their promo codes can be found in the show notes under this episode, wherever you're listening from. And also, you can head to badassbreastfeedingpodcast.com, check out our sponsor page, and also find all of our other episodes and information about scheduling your very own one-on-one online lactation consultation with Dianne.
And here we go.
I just took a break from some marketing so I can get back to talking about marketing. So marketing in and of itself is not unethical. We see marketing all the time. Marketing's all around us. We live in a capitalist world. This is the reality. And I hope that we're making clear what the difference is between the marketing that we see every day and formula marketing tactics from formula companies.
We're not the only ones saying this is unethical. This has been deemed unethical by
everyone.
Huge organizations around the world.
Yes. That is absolutely true. And it's, I'm not like literally I'm reading out of a well-researched book. I'm not making this up as I go.
Right.
So to pick up where we left off, wet nursing was a thing until formula came around. That became unpopular. Let's see. Most innovations arise Most innovations arise more out of the desire to profit from waste or surplus products than the quest to meet human need. When surpluses from the increasing production of butter and cheese promoted the search for market outlets, thus they became the base for artificial baby milk, as it is today. Not because research proved it to be the most suitable substitute for breast milk, but because it was plentiful and cheap. In 1987, a bottle was patented that could be suspended over the cot for the baby to feed alone, and another had short legs that could stand on the baby's chest. All of these things flooded the market. Cow's milk formula, all these bottles, artificial ways to feed your baby, and how vogue this was.
Mm-hmm.
Then we had doctors coming out. Well, let me read this paragraph, which is fantastic. Because rigorous exactitude was a part of scientific respectability, these experts presented their recipes in the form of complex mathematical and chemical formula. This is kind of what I was talking about, or exactly what I was talking about before. A successful cake is also a complex chemical reaction, depending on the precise proportions of ingredients. But cake is not called a formula. Whereas artificial milk for infants is, to this day. It is a ridiculous word reminiscent of the pseudoscience of those doctors, and it is a measure of the triumph of marketing that this promotional jargon is now used as a scientific term. And they would come up with these long formulas, which you can do for anything.
Right.
You know, what you could do for a milkshake. They come up with this ridiculous formulas, and this was, this was highly scientific, highly respectable. This is when authority and all of the, decision making was being moved from the family itself and the community to these medical experts in it for money. And then people had to return. So this was where people started having to, in order to have the babies, up to date on their formula, because it would change too, not really. But the doctor would say like, oh, we have to alter your baby's formula as they grow. So then the parent would have to keep coming back with their baby. And this is how doctors were making money. And then this is what I was talking about before. So then the formula companies were like, well, we can just make a regular formula that's for everybody. And then this is when doctors were like, hey, wait a minute. And then formula companies decided that they needed the doctors on their side and started to woo them.
And they've wooed them.
Oh, they sure have.
Yes,
they sure have. This also I was thinking because, we like to say, let me get more into this. So there were all of these kind of things that doctors were coming out with saying that, they would say like, well, your baby's not gaining enough weight. This is where the whole weight gain thing came in. Your baby's not gaining enough weight from birth. They're not getting enough protein. Oh, there was a whole protein fiasco. There's actually a chapter called The Protein Fiasco.
Oh my God.
Which was invented by this doctor who actually later on had to come out and say like that it was all wrong. And she was like trying to like fix her mess, but it was already done. Oh my God, I'm jumping around so much. I've lost my train of thought.
This is like craziness.
This is like craziness. That's what I was going to say.
It really is. Like I'm sitting here shaking my head. Not that anybody can see me.
No.
But there's so much linked to it.
Mm-hmm. Oh, this is what I was saying. So doctors started coming up with this bullshit that, all these reasons why somebody would need to use formula. And it's shit you hear today. And Dianne and I like to say like, oh, well, formula curriculum is like, this is from 50 years ago. This is from research 50 years ago. It's not from research at all. It's not from research at all. I'm starting to understand. It is from marketing tactics from doctors' offices, not 50 years ago, over 100 years ago. this is how powerful this marketing is. When you really start to make people believe this, it becomes normal. It becomes acceptable knowledge. It becomes normal thinking in society.
Mm-hmm.
Between 1911 and 1916, the same 6-fold mortality risk for babies in low-income families and a 4-fold risk in high-income families. So all the while, also, this was a time where we still had like sanitation issues. And these babies on formula were dying at a much higher rate especially of diarrhea.
Mm-hmm.
Artificially
because of water.
Yes. Artificially fed infants were 50 times more likely to die than those who were still breastfeeding. Yet this marketing continued. It's difficult to insist on breastfeeding because nurses and physicians are eager to have their infant show the greatest possible gain. It is the medical staff, not the mothers, who resisted the idea that breastfeeding worked. Later in the 1970s,
which wasn't all that long ago.
No, this was right. The 1970s wasn't that long ago. But somebody in the 1970s, a doctor came out and said that persuading medical staff about breastfeeding being beneficial was a lot harder than persuading parents.
My God.
The parents are like, okay, yeah, that makes sense. Breastfeeding, okay, good. Medical staff, no. Mm-mm. Oh, another thing that they talked about in this book was how there was a relationship between how basically the more medical professionals that a person comes into contact with, the less likely they are to breastfeed.
That is wild.
Isn't that fucking wild? I'm sorry, I'm cursing a lot.
Wild.
I'm sorry. Your babies don't know. They don't know. They don't know what I'm saying. They do mad too.
That is wild, that the more people that they came into contact with, the less likely they were to breastfeed.
Yes, currently. No, that's current. That is always in current.
Wow. That is just insanity.
I mean, the history, every quote that I'm reading, I'm flipping like 2 pages of history of what was going on in the early 1900s of, immigrants coming to this country and the way that they were feeding, because most people coming here were still breastfeeding.
Mm-hmm.
And then they get here and then it's looked down upon and they're not, supposed to be.
And this is the place to be, right? So you got to do what we're doing here.
This is the place to be and you got to do what we're doing here. Right. So then what happened next was we started to have, what happened next? I mean, I'm skipping also like decades of history. But the kind of next big formula advancement that happened was the sanitation. So then less babies were dying, which is great. But still more than breastfed babies were dying. There is an illusory complacency about the effects of artificial feeding in post-war Europe. At many a conference, someone will say confidently, most of us here were bottle fed and we are all healthy. This was often untrue. The long-term effects of not being breastfed are only beginning to be understood. Blood pressure, cholesterol levels, overweight, diabetes, and academic performance may all be linked, in part to how we are fed as babies. So this is what we hear a lot too. And this is where we can, let's take a pause to say something about fed as best. I know everyone's head just exploded because we are not supposed to talk about that. Fed as best irritates me. It doesn't matter if it irritates me. I do not like the term fed as best.
It's another marketing ploy.
It's another marketing ploy to get people to accept formula as normal. And it's a silencer. Mm-hmm. It means that you are then not allowed to talk about the predatory marketing tactics of formula companies. You're being judgmental. Fed is best. No, it's not. Fed is fed. We feed babies based on whatever their needs are and the parents' desires are.
Right. And there's lots of ways to do that.
There's a lot of
You
ways
can do
to do
formula.
that. But you cannot ignore the fact that there are risks to formula feeding. We are seeing this right here. We see it every day, that there are risks to not breastfeeding your baby. And people need to know this. People need to know that if they're not going to breastfeed, if they're not able to breastfeed, if they don't want to breastfeed, that there are things that you have to have all the information. You can't walk around calling yourself informed and not listen to information. That is literally the opposite of informed. I don't care what decision you make for your household, but let's all be real honest and clear about the science. And let's provide people with breastfeeding support if they want it and when they want it.
Right. And that's a big thing. That is a big part of it. Yeah. But I mean, in formula, we all know this is a pharmaceutical. This is part of big pharma. This is a pharmaceutical thing. Everybody has seen those commercials on TV for this drug and that drug. And what do they say in those? They give you all the side effects that's going to happen with those drugs. Why don't they do that with formula?
Right.
It wouldn't sell.
Right.
Who would want it if you heard all the side effects that would go along with it?
I mean, when you get a prescription drug, like I take Zoloft. When I get my Zoloft prescription, there's a friggin' booklet in there of all the things that to watch out for. All of the risks. And like, I know those risks. And so I have to take my personal health, physical health into consideration when I'm choosing these things. I mean, we go through these things thoughtfully, except when it comes to formula. No, you're not allowed to talk about it. You're judging me. And does it come with a booklet on all of the information about it? I kind of doubt it. I feel like there's lobbyists that are just lobbying real hard. I mean, there are lobbyists that lobby real hard to cover up the science. All right. Dr. Cicely Williams delivered a speech called Milk and Murder.
Oh, dear.
In 1939. And she said in this speech, if you are legal purists, you may wish me to change the title of this address to Milk and Manslaughter. But if your lives were embittered as mine by seeing day after day this massacre of the innocents by unsuitable feeding, then I believe you would feel as I do that misguided propaganda on infant feeding should be punished as the most miserable form of sedition, and that these deaths should be regarded as murder. Anyone who ignorantly or lightly causes a baby to be fed on unsuitable milk may be guilty of that child's death. So this is 1939. Wow. Like, people were up in arms about what was going on, and yet it just pushed forward like a bullet train. And this is when we started to have the sweetened condensed milk. And that was being marketed by Nestle. And this is also when, this was around the Second World War, when formula companies were like, hey, we really cornered the US market. What about the rest of the world? And so by 1967, only 25% of US babies were breastfed upon leaving the hospital. Damaging hospital practices made breastfeeding a near impossible procedure, and only women with alternative sources of support and knowledge were able to do it. It became common to administer routine lactation suppressant injections immediately after birth. And we are around the age where, like, like I think it was my parents when they were having babies was in that age group, like in the 60s and 70s. People were just, oh, I just got the shot. That's what my mom's friend always says. I just got the shot. I wasn't going to do that. I just got the shot.
I remember when I worked in the hospital, I went to go see this one person and she was unsure about breastfeeding, whatever. And her family was there, like being, naysaying it. And I walked out of the room and I heard through the door, whoever was there say, "Don't you listen to what they have to say. They can just give you a shot and everything will be dried up." It's like, they don't do that anymore. People were stroking out.
Yeah. I'm sorry.
Like, that's why they stopped doing it.
Yeah. They had to stop because it was really bad.
I mean, come on. Get with the program.
Yeah. And so this was around the time where formula companies had their eye on the international market. And the U.S. was consulted with many international companies and other countries, to come over and help develop their healthcare systems. So then doctors and, the U.S. was coming over and going like, okay, here, we're going to help you set up your healthcare system, and you're going to, have, formulas, how you feed babies. You don't do that breastfeeding thing. You buy this formula. We know that many of these countries still to this day do not have clean water. Mm-hmm. And people are making formula with dirty water. Babies are dying exponentially. Or they can't afford it, so they thin it out.
Right.
And this happens, people are like, oh yeah, the Nestle Bowl Cat in the 70s when people were, when Nestle was over there doing that. But this is not history. This happens still. Mm-hmm. And we never even really got into the Lancet article. That was just one chapter of that book. Was just kind of going through the history of that particular thing.
It's really interesting. It's really interesting how it came about.
Yeah. And so in the Lancet, one of the couple of quotes from, I know that we're running long, but I have a couple more quotes. Marketing is not inherently bad or unethical. However, formula marketing strategies, also used in other industries, systematically distort science, capture healthcare providers and parents, alter public opinion, and influence policymakers. Through these divisive practices, formula marketing impinges on the human rights of women and children, harms their health, and adversely affects society. This is what researchers are saying, not just me, because I feel like people get mad at me.
I know. Somebody's going to complain about this. Yeah.
I know. They will.
And it's not us. It's not us. Not like we're putting we made up this information.
Fact-based information on feeding infants and young children that is free from commercial influence is a human right that must be made available to all. The vital human process of feeding infants and young children should be off limits to commercial marketing. Mm-hmm. And I totally agree with that. There's just no room for marketing of this type of thing.
No.
Of course, they go into paid maternity leave. So the way that the part of this Lancet series is they have a list of recommendations. And recommendation number 1 is curtail the power and political activities of the formula marketing industry. Number 2, end state practices that do not uphold or that violate the rights of women and children. I mean, like, why does that have to be a recommendation? Like, you can't just not violate the rights of... Oh, it's crazy. Recognize, resource, and redistribute women's care work burdens in support of breastfeeding. That's where we can get maternity leave going on. Mm-hmm. Address structural deficiencies and commercial conflicts of interest in health systems to enable adequately resourced and effective models of maternity and infant and young child care. Number 5, increase public finance and correct the misalignment between private and public interests. And number 6, mobilize and resource advocacy coalitions to generate political commitment for breastfeeding. So that's their recommendations to increase breastfeeding rates and to decrease formula marketing. I don't feel hopeful, but I'm glad that there's, and it just goes to show, like, there's all these people saying this. There's all these experts, researchers, and doctors, and all of these people who are saying this is wrong. This is damaging. Yet here we are.
Here we are. Not much has changed.
No, not much has changed at all. I that was like really crazy to me when it was like they started going on about weight gain. I'm like, oh my God, that's exactly where that came from.
Yeah.
It's like, talk about how things won't die. Jesus.
My God. Yeah.
Well, so I look forward to reading more of this book and bringing more of it to everyone's attention. And it's called The Politics of Breastfeeding. And the Lancet series we can link that in the show notes. And we'd love to hear from you. Unless you're mad at me, then I don't want to.
There's another book out there too that I haven't read yet, but it's called When Breasts Are Bad for Business.
Oh, yeah.
Which is, I'm assuming, right along the same line.
Oh, wait. No, that's this book. That's the subtitle of this book. The Politics of Breastfeeding. When Breasts Are Bad for Business.
Yeah. Okay, well, that's no wonder. I know there's another one.
I'm like,
too,
wait,
though.
That sounds really familiar.
Yeah. I know there's another one too, though.
There are several books about this topic. And it's funny. People just keep writing books about it, keep talking about it, and people are just still mad about it.
I don't know. So thanks for listening to us.
Yeah, thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.